True, the nightmare of total organisation has emerged and is now awaiting us just around the next corner.
With the rise of brain-computer interfaces and biometric sensors and so forth, all the bodies, all the brains would be connected together to a network, and you won't be able to survive if you're disconnected from the net.
All life on Earth is going to be radically changed.
It's a fusion of the physical, the digital, and the biological world. It's changing who we are.
These people have gotten to the point now where they are openly anti-human.
Everything will be monitored. The environmental consequences of every human action.
They cannot happen without digital ID.
Once the digital ID is in place, it's game over for humanity.
The ideology of a world dictated through science is deep-rooted. Almost a century ago, a movement was established in the United States, preaching that the population should be governed by an elite of selected experts, scientists and academics, rather than democratically elected politicians. They called it technocracy.
These engineers and scientists from Columbia University promoted what they thought was going to be the replacement for capitalism and free enterprise. It's not going to be an economic system. It's going to be based on resources and energy, control over energy. They thought that science was the answer for everything. They didn't have any spiritual bone at all. You know, they were very mechanistic in their thinking.
The definition was clear.
Technocracy is the science of social engineering, the scientific operation of the entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population.
The movement was short-lived, but the principle never died. As we'll demonstrate, a stranglehold on policy and resources has always been the ambition of the powerful oligarchs behind many of today's world institutions.
It seems to me that there's a very strong drift in the direction of globalization, of the ultimate centralization of control in the hands of unelected officials at supranational organizations. The lust to control other human beings is a story as old as time.
They want all of the resources of the world in their pocket. They do not want you and me to have anything. It's in writing all over the World Economic Forum's website. By 2030, you will own nothing and be happy. That's an oxymoron. If you don't have anything of your name, you ain't going to be happy about it.
The World Economic Forum may have called that infamous phrase a prediction, but it translates as a statement of intent on behalf of its global power brokers.
The bigger picture is that an attempt is underway now to collapse liberal democracy and replace it with global technocracy. What I call an omni-war is now underway, which is to say that the transnational ruling class is literally, it's not a metaphor, is literally at war with the rest of humanity and has weaponized everything that it can.
This is a coup. They can remove the power from the parliament and the legislative branch and consolidate it into a monetary system which has complete control.
That control is now entirely achievable because the would-be controllers finally have the tools to execute it. Total surveillance, artificial intelligence, digital IDs, and central bank digital currencies.
The potential for social control is gigantic and potentially irreversible.
What our experts are describing is a world commanded by an exclusive group of bankers and industrialists, affecting every aspect of our lives. What we eat, what we can buy, where we travel, where we live, and all bypassing democratically elected governments. You could be forgiven for thinking this is a grand conspiracy theory, but please consider this.
The term conspiracy theory has become one of the most successful propaganda terms of all time in closing down discussion and debate. It's a thought-terminating cliche, but nevertheless, it's surprisingly effective when you try to calmly present evidence in a factual and reasoned manner
In this film, we will present evidence that the global takeover is not only possible, it's actually happening, and has been decades in the making. They plan to commandeer land, reduce farming, and radically change the food we eat, transform the supply of electricity, and then dictate how we use it, and replace currency with a system of credits under their control. It's a classic template to win the war, take control of food, of energy, and of money. And here's the key. All three strategies are built on the premise of a climate crisis caused by carbon dioxide, a gas that is actually vital for life on the planet. So what if the whole carbon narrative was one gargantuan lie? A political maneuver to establish their brave new world.
A big lie is a lie which is told on such a scale that ordinary people simply would not imagine it to be possible.
People with empathy can't fathom that a group of people would organize and engineer this kind of mass atrocity to get where they want to go.
It should come as no surprise that financial kingpins are calling the shots. And it's certainly no conspiracy theory when banking executives spell out their intentions.
We are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new accounting is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having an almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens.
We are shifting to a new financial system, but the general population is not shifting to a new financial system. It's shifting to a control grid.
CBDC can allow government agencies and private sector players to program, to create smart contracts, to allow targeted policy functions. For example, welfare payment. For example, consumption coupon. For example, food stamp. By programming CBDC, those money can be precisely targeted for what kind of people can own and what kind of use this money can be utilized.
A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations, and also we will have the technology to enforce that.
They're saying we can control with rules. We don't need currency anymore. And so it's no longer a financial system or a currency system. It's purely a digital concentration camp. It's a slavery system.
When Catherine Austin Fitts talks, we should listen. She's a former high-level investment banker in New York and held senior office in the first Bush administration in Washington.
Models of how it could work. But essentially, you will have, whether it's a banking account or a credit card, and it can be turned off and on. So my incentive system is not you go to work and work hard and you get money. My incentive system can be based on how you behaved in the last 5 minutes, on a 24/7 basis.
CBDCs, as the name suggests, would be issued by central banks like the Federal Reserve in America and the Bank of England, not by high street banks. They would signal the end of cash, and every transaction you make would be transparent and held on a permanent database. Crucially, under a net zero regime, your carbon footprint could be at the heart of the system.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker.
This can be the infrastructure for a carbon credit system. It's totalitarian control, and if people don't become aware of it now, it's going to be too late to backtrack from this. It's a ratchet system where it's very difficult, if not impossible, to backtrack.
But why is now the time for change?
Because the system is in crisis. It entered crisis in 2019. Mark Carney, he talked quite openly about how the international monetary and financial system had entered profound crisis and was effectively on its last legs.
If you study the history of how the central bankers designed technocracy, you know, essentially when they created the Fed, they said, look, this can't last forever. We're going to need, you know, at some point somebody's going to get hip to this game. We're going to need another system. And I will say this, because I used to be part of that, you know, I was born and bred to be a central banker. They plan ahead hundreds of years in advance.
Predictably, the money brokers seem to hold all the cards. Does the ruling class need to protect itself as artificial intelligence threatens mass unemployment? And what will happen to our existing assets if the banking system is collapsed and money disappears overnight? In an unknown future, one thing is certain. Digital IDs are essential to the project. If they become compulsory, data on every detail of our lives will be monitored, stored, and monetized. Nothing, but nothing, would be private.
For younger people, often it's the case that they like technology, they're completely au fait with it, they enjoy it. So they don't see the dangers that technology can bring because, like a drug dealer does, you feed people, you know, low levels of drug where it's all fun. And then later, when you have them addicted, you feed the hard stuff and that destroys their life. So in a similar way, all of this technology is currently pretty much nice, but when the central bank digital currency comes in and the control comes in and the censorship systems, then the younger people will realize all too late in many cases that they've walked themselves into a trap.
Capitalists are already making billions of dollars selling our information to big corporations, because this kind of detailed knowledge enables them to predict and influence our behavior. Worse, our children are being exploited.
There are a lot of board games and other games that are already in the market and have been for over 2 years that have cameras inside and underneath these LED screens that are observing and scoring and emotionally calibrating the faces of all the children. So are all the iPads that they use in schools. They're all manipulating children's behavior by what they display on the screens. And child data is big business. There's a concept called social impact investing, which people should read up on. If your kids are in schools, they are already being traded on Wall Street in real time. They can bet on groups of kids whether they're going to be successful or not, whether they're going to become computer scientists or environmental engineers. So children have become essentially a commodity. It's going to be used to fully control the behavior of children as well as how they behave with respect to, diversity, equity, inclusivity, etc.
The Chinese have already gone one step further.
Classrooms have robots that analyze students' health and engagement levels. Students wear uniforms with chips that track their locations. There are even surveillance cameras that monitor how often students check their phones or yawn during classes. These sensors pick up electrical signals sent by neurons in the brain. The neural data is then sent in real time to the teacher's computer.
We've been drawn into this digital spy network in the name of convenience, connectivity, safety, and especially entertainment. The 3D world of cyberspace creates virtual lives that are often more exciting than reality.
Why is this technology being developed? It's all for the culmination of this digital prison from which there will be no escape after all the switches are turned on.
The critical switch would be the introduction of a world of zero trust.
Zero trust is based on a simple principle. Never trust, always verify.
Zero Trust is a protocol that is implemented by cybersecurity companies. And what it really means is we don't trust you, and you have to prove who you are all the time, 24/7. So think of it as going from a world of implicit allow to default deny. In tomorrow's world, once Zero Trust is implemented in, say, retail, everything will be behind plexiglass doors with a 3D camera, and it'll only be unlocked through your digital identity and facial recognition if you have the available carbon credits in your digital currency.
If you've reached the limit of your allowance, it could be access denied. This would apply to fuel, to travel, to meat and dairy products, to clothes and other consumer goods. Because everything in life could be valued by its carbon footprint. Even access to the internet could be denied.
So the new world of zero trust is really a world of locks. It's like an inverted prison. You are supposedly free to roam about, but everything you want to access is behind lock and key.
Digital technologies mainly have an analytical power. Now we go into a predictive power. But since the next step could be to go into a prescriptive mode, which means you do not even have to have elections anymore, because we know what the result will be.
Ultimately, we're facing manipulation by the system. A world where instead of us using technology, technology is using us. But who's really pulling the strings? Banking and oil dynasties like Rothschild and Rockefeller inevitably get mentioned, as do the modern-day big tech masters, including the ubiquitous Bill Gates. David Hughes takes a wider view.
It's those who own the means of production, who are capable of magicking money out of thin air, who control the media, and all of the other means of production, which have now been weaponized against the rest of the global population.
Catherine Austin Fitz, the banking insider, adds a sinister thought.
If you know their name, they're not at the top.
Either money and manipulation by a small group of people who share common interests, and a belief that the world needs top-down control for maximum efficiency. As we'll see, it could result in the destruction of the farming industry in favour of laboratory foods, and a shortage of electricity because of the race to net zero.
Net zero means the impoverishment of ordinary people. It means fundamental changes to their lifestyles, and the politicians are not being honest with the people about it.
Surprisingly, the blueprint for transformation is woven into the United Nations Agenda 2030, ostensibly a vision for a better world.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I say again that taken together, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Climate Agreement provide humanity with a master plan for a sustainable way of life on this planet.
New York City, late September 2024, the setting for the United Nations Summit of the Future, a gathering of member nations to reinforce and accelerate Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The plan has a broad spectrum and is full of worthy ambition. But behind those deliberately bright and colourful boxes lies a darker theme, a shifting of influence and potentially power towards unelected world bodies. The strategy goes back well into the last century, and pressure is growing, because the goals are far behind targets set at the grand relaunching in 2015.
17 inspiring Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Our aim is clear, our mission is possible, and our destination is in...
The goals are far behind targets set at the grand relaunching in 2015.
17 inspiring sustainable...
To learn to speak what I call UNEs. You have to know what the terms mean if you want to truly understand what is being discussed. When they talk about peacekeeping forces or the peacekeeping role of the United Nations, they're actually talking about the war-making capabilities of the United Nations. So you have this Orwellian doublespeak. When they talk about transparency, more often than not, they're talking about eliminating your privacy. Human rights is another very, very good example. They make very clear in this document that your rights can be restricted under the guise of public order or morality or whatever the case may be. And so they're saying, here's your rights, but by the way, they're not really rights. We can revoke them at any time. The UN is filled with contradictions like this. Like, for example, when they talk about gender equality, right? A normal person in the Western world thinks gender equality means a woman has a right to earn money, to own property, to have all the rights and privileges that a man would have. When you look at the individuals who lead this movement within the UN, you're talking about radical feminists. You're talking about people who are very interested in dissolving the nuclear family. As you dig into these goals, it's very clear we're dealing with something far more nefarious. Once you look past the marketing slogans, the kind of warm and fuzzy, we're going to end hunger, which again is just window dressing, you realize that this is actually a blank check for totalitarian global control.
Author and campaigner, the late Rosa Koire, called out the plan more than a decade ago.
It is the biggest public relations scam in the history of the world. But it's far more than that. It's a blueprint. It is the action plan to inventory and control all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all information, all energy, all means of production, and all human beings in the world.
What can be measured can be managed and ultimately monetized. In fact, a study at Yale, the public have no say.
There's no route that an ordinary person can take to make a representation to United Nations. So it's fundamentally undemocratic. What it has done is build relationships with billionaires.
Right from the start, the rich and powerful have enjoyed undue influence in the UN's inner sanctum. In fact, the Rockefeller family part-financed its headquarters in Manhattan.
To hand you, Mr. Lee, my father's check.
Between them, the Rockefeller family has funded hundreds of organizations and as a consequence spread their authority on civil society, institutions, banking, education, and global politics. The Rockefellers always believed in world governance. In the 1950s, their Special Studies Project report declared,
"The UN stands finally as a symbol of the world order that will one day be built."
In 1973, David Rockefeller co-founded a non-governmental organization which still carries international power today, the Trilateral Commission. Its stated objectives revived technocracy and in turn planted the seeds of the UN's Sustainable Development Agenda.
They said at the time,
Trojan horse to change the world's financial control systems. Now consider the events at Jackson Hole, Wyoming in August 2019, only 3 months before the COVID outbreak. It's when Mark Carney delivered his call for change and BlackRock proposed a new financial mechanism, Going Direct, which in principle allows central banks to channel capital direct to large corporations.
So the central bankers got together in 2019, the G7 central bankers, and voted on the Going Direct Reset. And the Going Direct Reset, of which the COVID operation was part of it, has done a phenomenally excellent job of massively consolidating capital into central control. If you look at the COVID operation from a financial standpoint, it was absolutely clear that it was one way you balance the books. It worked.
The major corporations like Amazon and others were allowed to continue business. Meanwhile, other businesses, particularly small and medium-sized entities, were deemed to be, quote, inessential. Many of them were put out of business. And so what we saw was a global wealth transfer of a reported $3.3 trillion from the working classes and the middle classes to this kind of super rich billionaire brigade.
The people who ran the operation made an absolute fortune. It was economically, as a taking, it was a huge taking.
And that included billions of pounds of taxpayers' money going to pharmaceutical firms for so-called vaccines. Whatever the truth around COVID, Dr. Hughes says the response deployed dangerous elements of social control, what he calls weaponized deception.
We see techniques of shock and awe being applied through the lockdowns, techniques of isolation, making reality seem strange and threatening. All of this helps to depattern the mind. These are all well-known military tactics.
Look them in the eyes and tell them you're doing all you can to stop the spread of COVID-19. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
These are, in fact, very nasty and very vicious techniques which were deployed against the public of multiple countries at once. These are forms of serious psychological abuse. I think once the public starts to understand that, there's going to be a very severe pushback against everything that's happened.
The general population cannot fathom the psychopathy of the vision that they're facing. So they can't fathom that a group of people would organize and engineer this kind of mass atrocity to get where they want to go.
Is its One Health initiative.
One Health is a concept that was created to enable the WHO, with these documents, to take over jurisdiction of everything in the world by saying that climate change, animals, plants, water systems, ecosystems are all central to health.
That places the Director General in a key position to influence world events. Another potential conflict of interests given the WHO's financial backing, particularly from the pharmaceutical sector. Its accounts for 2022 show that an eye-watering 84%, or $3.656 billion of income, came from voluntary donations. The top 4 sources of these donations included the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Gavi, a public-private vaccine alliance also heavily supported by Gates.
People see the WHO as a benign organization, and there are still areas where the WHO does useful stuff. But the biggest focus now is purely on a tiny disease burden where investors can extract a large amount of wealth. This has shifted the WHO's focus very much to this emergency agenda, which is very false. Pandemics are very rare events.
This is why we now have a WHO that promotes vaccines all the time, because that's what the money is coming in to support. So instead of being a World Health Organization, we have a World Vaccine Organization, and that seems to be the only thing they're touting.
What's in the treaty has got nothing to do with health. It's a business deal focused on the most profitable business imaginable, pandemic profiteering.
The other part of it, they're setting up a huge surveillance network. We're talking about $31 billion a year. They have to surveil for variants of viruses, and they will find them. They just have to decide there's a threat, not even a real harm.
Experts are preparing for what is known as Disease X, or the next pandemic virus.
They're creating a supranational, self-perpetuating pandemic industry.
The latest scare is monkeypox, renamed Mpox, a disease highly unlikely to affect the general population. Nevertheless, the WHO has acted.
The emergency committee met and advised me that, in its view, the situation constitutes a public health emergency of international concern.
If you get to declare the emergency and then profit from it, there's a big problem, isn't there?
It's essentially a build-out of big pharma, and the WHO is essentially looking to be their marketing and distribution arm worldwide.
WHO, the people say no! WHO, the people say no!
We're fighting for really the right to own our own lives. We're fighting for that freedom versus sort of corporate authoritarian structure or medical fascist structure, which is what is clearly interests are trying to impose on us.
Changes to the WHO's regulations are expected to be voted through in the coming months. As we speak, the UK government is fully behind them. Meanwhile, in common with many other global institutions, the WHO tries to silence criticism and dissent, branding it misinformation. The science it says, is settled. Control over policy. The UK's Prime Minister, himself a one-time member of the Trilateral Commission, has already declared his interest.
You have to choose now between Davos or Westminster.
Davos.
Why?
Because Westminster is too constrained, and it's closed, and we're not having meaning. Once you get out of Westminster, whether it's Davos or anywhere else, you actually engage with people that you can see working with in the future. Westminster is just a tribal shouting place.
Starmer seems to forget that he is elected by the people, to serve the people through Parliament. That's his democratic duty. And while he refuses to listen to our farmers, he entertains the globalists in Downing Street and publicly doubles down on his philosophy.
I'm determined to deliver growth, create wealth, and put more money in people's pockets. This can only be achieved by working in partnership with leading businesses like BlackRock to capitalise on the UK's position as a world-leading hub for investment.
To underline the influence of non-elected, unaccountable policy drivers, consider this document from 2004. It was commissioned by the UN and produced by financial institutions, including the World Bank. It cited research by the WEF. The result was the emergence of environmental, social, and governance metrics, ESGs.
The ESG is an attempt to turn financial power into governance without going through the democratic process, or without the normal process of making law.
ESGs allow major asset management companies such as BlackRock to impose ideologies on businesses and consumers across the world through their investment strategies. BlackRock's billionaire chairman and CEO, Larry Fink, also a board member of the WEF, remember, is clear.
You have to force behaviors. If you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted.
Now we get ethics, green ethics, racial ethics, gender ethics, driving corporate decisions about who may have money, what they may use their money for, and how they're going to behave in society and what they're going to do with it. This is a new form of political power that isn't accountable, isn't transparent, and it isn't democratic.
We, the public, are being manipulated. Our lifestyles, our culture, and our future, be it through forced woke ideologies, intrusive technologies, so-called pandemics, censorship, or information which is too often propaganda. Your compliance is vital to the agenda. To impose global solutions, the leadership needs you to believe in global problems.
Climate change is here, it is terrifying, and it is just the beginning.
Farming has been at the heart of our lives for generations, but to the climate change advocates, suddenly it's a threat.
A lot of people have no clue that agriculture contributes about 33% of all the emissions of the world. You just can't continue to both warm the planet while also expecting to feed it. Doesn't work.
One thing John Kerry didn't mention was that farming and agriculture contributes 100% of the food that we need to eat. So that's a little kind of an important detail that he ought to have mentioned. And I think what we're dealing with here is actually a global war on agriculture. I believe they are demolishing our food infrastructure, partly to cause a crisis, right? And I guarantee you, mark my words, we're going to be in a food crisis and they're going to say it's climate change.
I wouldn't say it's about saving the planet, no. I would say it's about land grab and about profiteering and corporatization of our food sector.
It's basically the pharmaceutical industry taking over the food supply. If I can switch everybody from real food to pharma food, then 100% of the agriculture industry can go through my publicly traded stocks, and I have complete control. So the idea is we get rid of farmers, we kill any naturally grown food, and we engineer food in manufacturing plants and laboratories. But I assure you that those guys are not eating this.
Bill Gates is one of the familiar corporate faces, and he's investing heavily in the food revolution under the guise of avoiding climate disaster.
Cows alone account for about 6% of global emissions. So we need to change cows.
And while he talks up the perceived problem, Gates is pouring money into the supposed solution: artificial meat and genetically modified crops. Crucially, anything that is invented or altered can be patented.
The core of his agenda is he wants to do in agriculture and pharmaceuticals, by the way, what he did in the computer world. True power, massive, incalculable wealth comes from owning intellectual property and then monopolizing it. They want to make it so that every single organism that is used for food is ultimately under their control, either through the 3D printing or through this genetic manipulation. So we're moving now very rapidly toward this totally centralized food system where a tiny handful of corporate interests in bed with totalitarian government will dominate the food supply, so that there is only a giant public-private partnership with total control of all food, all energy, and I believe water will be next.
While the global machinations continue, thousands of farmers fear for their livelihoods. And the new UK government's first budget has multiplied those fears. By reducing relief on inheritance tax, they're penalising those who would want to pass their farms to sons or daughters. The National Farmers Union described it as
a disastrous budget
for family farms that would
snatch away the next generation's ability to carry on producing British food and see farmers forced to sell land to pay the tax.
For Kelly Seaton, concern goes well beyond her family farm in Cheshire.
It makes me feel incredibly sad that the dairy and meat industry is so vilified. You will never find anything as nutritionally complete as milk and meat. The food that is going to replace milk, meat, and all of the other products that we produce in this country is going to be very nutritionally lacking. They will starve us from nutrients, and then the pharmaceutical companies will probably pick up the slack on that, all of which create a profiteering circle.
No Farmers, No Food was set up to campaign against untenable net zero and climate change policies. Farmers, says Kelly, are being dealt a deeply unfair hand.
When cows are blamed for climate change, it does make you question everything. And I think this is where a lot of farmers are waking up to the fact that there's a lot of lies being told to us. The problem with the current carbon system is that a lot of big corporations are offsetting their carbon. So most dairy producers now especially, but other farmers as well, are having to record their carbon footprint on systems that aren't fit for purpose. They are woo-woo figures pulled from the sky, quite frankly, and then the big corporations are using that data to offset their carbon so that they can look better, again, at the same time as beating us with a stick and saying that we're the ones killing the planet with these girls.
The methane emitted by cows' digestive system is part of the argument against them, but Kelly says that's just hot air.
The grass that they eat would produce the same amount of methane whether they ate it or not. OK, they do speed that up, but the other thing they give us is this, muck, which we put on the fields to fertilise the fields and reduces our reliance on buying in fertiliser.
200 miles to the south, Ed Rhodes farms 188 acres of Devon countryside. He's not part of the No Farmers, No Food movement, but agrees that the whole narrative on cows and climate change is wrong.
As farmers, we recycle carbon all the time. That's what we do. You could almost define farmers as carbon recyclers. We're an organic beef, sheep and vegetable farm. We run a fairly traditional system of rotational farming. We'll have a field which would be growing a brassica crop for 1 year, a non-brassica crop for another year, such as broad beans or sweet corn, and then we have a break for that field, so it goes into a predominantly grass and clover mix. That allows the soil to recover from the work that we've done with it while we've had the vegetables growing. It also allows things like the clover to put nitrogen back into the soil. So the livestock are absolutely essential for grazing that grassland. We also mow it so that the hay, the silage that we take from those fields are fed to the cattle in the winter. The bale I'm sitting on, the bedding that they're standing on, is all mown from very rushy areas on our farm. The animals then dung onto that. We compost that. That gets spread onto the land primarily where we're growing the vegetables to put the fertility in, and that's what then produces our crops. If you remove livestock from the system, you have no system.
Farmers like Ed Rhodes work with knowledge and passion, but still have to comply with a labyrinth of government rules and regulations, including carbon monitoring. And now land itself is under threat. Corporations such as British Airways are buying farms to plant trees for carbon offsets, while other areas are being declared sites of special scientific interest, restricting or even preventing use for crops and livestock. And then there's the United Nations SDGs.
Goal 15. Protect, restore and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems.
Consequently, rewilding programmes are impacting farmland across the world. In the UK, for example, the government is planning to set apart 1,200 square miles for wildlife habitat by 2042. That's an area almost as large as Cornwall. And in America, dams are being removed and river courses reopened, disrupting water supplies for crops. Goal 13 states,
take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts.
As a result, the Dutch government plans to close 3,000 farms to meet EU emissions targets, drawing widespread protests. And in Denmark, farmers face paying £80 for every cow they own in a world-first tax on meat.
Goal 7. Ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy for all.
One result: cultivated land is disappearing under vast solar parks. How does this square with the UN's biodiversity goals or even ending hunger? Maybe they're questions for Ed Miliband, the UK's Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero. He's cleared the way for a huge solar park on prime farmland in East Anglia, an area big enough to site 1,745 football pitches.
It's a crime to take food productive land out for solar panels, which are unrecyclable, potentially not that productive going forward, and not feed the planet. It is absolutely catastrophic. We've gone from being 78% self-sufficient in 1984 to now less than 60% self-sufficient. I think it's about 54%, which I think is set to fall even further this year.
On top of all that, British farmers are being paid not to produce food under schemes like the Sustainable Farming Incentive. Kelly Seaton understands that many farmers accept the money to balance their books, but has this warning.
When you look at how many farms are selling up, how many arable farms are struggling, we're walking into food shortages, and I think we're going to end up eating more processed food, maybe lab-grown meat, and I think that's part of the plan.
The squeeze on farming is self-evident. Our supply of natural food is under very real threat, just as the WEF predicted. Worse than that, Catherine Austin Fitz says that with programmable currency, you wouldn't have a choice.
No one in their right mind would ever eat this stuff. But the reality is, once they have control of your transactions, they can dictate what food you can and cannot buy. If they want you to buy pizza made with insect-based flour, that's what you're going to get.
There's an energy crisis even though there is an abundance of energy. There's a food crisis, even though there's plenty of food to feed the world. There's a water crisis, even though 70% of the Earth's surface is covered with it. There's an air crisis where CO2 is declared the enemy of mankind, even though it's necessary for life to exist on Earth. There's a resource crisis, even though there are abundant resources to support everyone. What's with us here, you know? Who created all these crises? They did it. Just as clear as the nose on my face. It's all been a sham. All the essential things of life, they've been declared to be scarce, because things that are scarce you can control.
The architects of such globalist trajectories, all the Kissingers, Rockefellers, Schwabs, Carneys, Strongs, Carstens, are held out as great intellects, but they are nothing of the sort. We know both in theory and in practice that centralization causes nothing but misery because it destroys the mechanisms of error correction, leading to doubling down on flawed policies.
And yet the creed of global dominance continues apace. Through the WHO's so-called pandemic agreement, its One Health initiative, and ultimately the United Nations Agenda 2030. From medical diktats to gender and racial politics to climate change, the indoctrination runs deep. Local councils have been sucked in by the tentacles of global power, encouraging them to spend vast amounts of time and taxpayers' money on climate schemes, without challenging the rationale.
Local councils have taken these actions because they are part of or lobbied by a network of green organisations throughout the United Kingdom. For example, UK 100, there's also C40 Cities, and there's the Global Covenant of Mayors. And these organisations require local authorities to sign pledges that say they're going to ban cars from streets, we're going to make people vegetarian, and we're going to restrict certain forms of trade faster than is required by national government. They've been able to do this because democratic engagement at the local level is so weak. The voters' decisions are completely outweighed by the influence of the green blob, essentially.
One organisation, Climate Emergency UK, has introduced scorecards, a league table to compare the progress of councils. It brings both pressure and opportunity.
It creates the idea that a local councillor is a planet saver. And of course, there are organisations that, like the UK 100, that are going to flatter people in that position. They're going to indulge those people and say how important they are, whereas most of the rest of the public are going to probably see them and say, what the hell are you doing?
Ben Pyle emphasises that such organisations are not grassroots initiatives.
Civil society has been bought and it's been organised around the interests of its billionaire philanthropists.
Newspapers and television also consistently push the same story.
We've been hearing about the threat of climate change for decades, but now we can't ignore it.
Here, the climate crisis is very real, and it is getting worse.
What mainstream media does in following this narrative is that they exclude vast areas of climate science. They exclude all the skeptical scientists. By the BBC, which has done it for 20 years, saying that you cannot have any other view apart from the settled narrative, is doing an enormous disservice to science.
Journalists and broadcasters are schooled in the carbon doctrine by organisations such as the Carbon Literacy Project, which claims to have trained 1,000 BBC employees. Meanwhile, Sky joined forces with the psychologists of the Behavioural Insights team to produce this initiative: How the Power of Television Can Nudge Viewers to Decarbonise Their Lifestyles. The recommendations included:
give green content more screen time, more salience in plots and scenes. Use kids' content to encourage positive environmental behaviours amongst children and their parents.
How then can we possibly expect impartiality in reporting? Rather, we're served with propaganda, statements that nobody seems willing or able to question.
It is unequivocal that human activities are responsible for climate change.
I can take current media and almost any climate story I can write, I think, a very effective counter. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. This is endemic to a media that is ill-informed and has an agenda. The agenda is to promote alarm and induce governments to decarbonize. There's an organization called Covering Climate Now, which is a nonprofit membership organization. Their mission is to promote the narrative. They will not allow anything to be broadcast or written that is counter to the narrative.
Among the 500+ media partners on the Covering Climate Now website are Reuters, Bloomberg, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, NBC, Channel 4 News, The Guardian, The Daily Mirror and The Lancet, as well as several British universities. Funders of Covering Climate Now have included the Rockefeller Family Fund, the Rockefeller Family and Associates, and the One Earth Fund.
It's true that the mainstream media only report one side of the story and that most of them are in the pocket of the powerful people who are trying to implement these changes. I don't question that at all. But it's also true that people are listening to them less and less and reading them less and less. We see independent media people with much larger audiences than mainstream papers. And I think that phenomenon will gather pace now.
That rise in independent voices has seen institutions like the UN, the WEF, big tech companies and broadcasters like the BBC wage war on what they call mis, dis and malinformation. They don't appreciate views they can't control.
The fight for truth is on.
Independent Voices has seen institutions like the UN, the WEF, big tech companies and broadcasters like the BBC wage war on what they call mis, dis and malinformation. They don't appreciate views they can't control.
The fight for truth is on.
Media, obsessed local councils, and then there are the universities, which should be the first and last bastions of objective research and open debate. But here too is a story of outside pressure.
With the drop in government funding, the shortfall has been made up from other sources, and those tend to be NGOs, private organisations. For example, the Gates Foundation and the Wellcome Trust. Invariably, money from private organisations will come with vested interests.
These vested interests, according to Professor Moss, drive university teaching towards business goals and ideologies at the expense of critical thinking and levels of academic achievement. One new initiative is the European Network on Climate and Health Education, led by Glasgow University. Medical students have been trained to accept that climate science is an established fact.
Increasingly, climate change is harming people's health. You could say it's the largest health emergency of our time, and I do need to be ready to help tackle this challenge.
Can the outcomes really be free of prejudice when the backers include the WHO and major pharmaceutical companies?
This new collaboration will help train the next generation of medics with the skills they need to treat the health impacts of climate change and deliver more sustainable healthcare.
That's why health leaders from across the public and private sectors are coming together to support this transformative new network.
Academics, right from the beginning now, are socialised to orientate their research towards the money. So this, I think, is quite damaging when it comes to fearlessly pursuing the truth wherever it may lead. That doesn't really happen anymore in academia. It's
the ambition of big business, the mission creep of so-called woke thinking, the cancel culture, the suppression and smearing of those who dare to question. Shockingly, the conditioning starts in the youngest of minds.
All aboard for global goals!
This year, Thomas and his friends have teamed up with the United Nations.
The world of young children is supposed to be one of innocence and joy, but it's been permeated by the global ideologies of the United Nations.
If you go to goal number 4, it deals exclusively with education. And when you think education, recognize they're talking about indoctrination.
The Sustainable Development Goals.
Under the surface of it all is this effort to bring all the children of the world into this one world globalist system. And what's so remarkable about this to me is that it's not even hidden anymore.
Take part in the global movement
to save our world from being destroyed.
How will you fight climate change?
Try meat-free meals. Reduce your electricity use. Give your clothes a second chance.
We died! It's kind of your fault!
And you can never ignore Greta.
The eyes of all future generations are upon you. And if you choose to fail us, I say we will never forgive you.
I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic.
We want action. We want justice. Let's want action. And we want it now. No more coal. No more oil. Keep your...
I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. I want you to act as if the house was on fire, because it is.
This propaganda relentlessly promoting fear in various ways, be it disease, be it climate, I think is having a very damaging impact on young people's mental health.
The disasters that continue increasingly to afflict the natural world have one element that connects them all: the unprecedented increase in the number of human beings on the planet.
We're asking children to believe they are a scourge on the planet. I have a problem with children believing they shouldn't be here from the off. How are we ever going to encourage them to have strong mental health and emotional well-being if they believe that their birth is a disaster for the planet? That's not encouraging them to be productive citizens who are making an active contribution to society if they've got to apologise for their very existence. I think it's very dangerous, and I think we need to reverse that as soon as possible.
The indoctrination of children is further evidenced across their learning. Objectivity and freedom of thought are being stifled by the persistent pushing of agendas.
I undertook a study of secondary school textbooks to see what children are being taught. And what I found was extremely shocking. I found unqualified acceptance of climate change, the wonders of vaccines, GM foods, and very few counter-arguments were presented. If you cannot produce this information that's in the textbooks, you cannot succeed in the school system. If a student undertaking a geography exam, for example, doesn't talk about man-made climate change, then they're very unlikely to hit the top marks. Is it not surprising that the phrase critical thinking actually only occurs in relation to two subjects? One is art and design, and the other is history. Other than that, it's completely absent from the national curriculum. If we have a dumbed-down syllabus, we're actually stunting children's brain capacity and brain potential.
While parents may not be fully aware of these issues, many are concerned at the growing trend of gender politics, including transgendering. One former head teacher says his local authority advised teachers not to use the words boy or girl for fear of misgendering anyone.
The Department for Education as well has really subscribed to this kind of woke ideology, so there's almost like brownie points for the more woke you can be.
Why do you have makeup and lipstick?
lipstick and glitter on?
Because I think it looks pretty. Oh! You don't think it looks pretty?
What schools have done is employ third-party agencies to deliver material for which the third parties most certainly have a vested interest in. And I wouldn't have a problem if it was I'm there in school to ask children to accept me as I am. That's fine. We all need to be tolerant and liberal in a diverse society. My problem is that what they're actually doing is more a form of evangelism, which is, this is who I am and you might be too.
In my heart, I've always known that I'm a girl, Teddy, not a boy, Teddy. I wish my name was Tilly, not Thomas.
Real education, a dumbing down in the classroom, fluidity of gender, the impact of technology. Are our children being groomed for a life in the digital prison?
Today, nobody has any idea what to teach young people that will still be relevant in 20 years. As computers become better and better in more and more fields, there is a distinct possibility that computers will outperform us in most tasks and will make humans redundant. And then the big political and economic question of the 21st century will be, what do we need humans for? Or at least, what do we need so many humans for?
Do you have an answer in the book?
At present, the best guess we have is keep them happy with drugs and computer games. But this doesn't sound like a very appealing future.
A chilling forecast, and one which echoes Brave New World, in which the oligarchs did indeed provide drugs and entertainment so that people learned to love their enslavement. Yet there are even darker clouds on the horizon, the spectre of trans.
Feel too afraid to have kids because we feel that we're heading towards civilization breakdown.
People under the age of 35 are more likely to report climate change as a reason not to have children.
I've decided not to have kids to do my part for climate change.
If I don't think the future is worth anything, then I'm not going to have children. If I think it is worth something, I will have children.
I think these ideas have spread like bad viruses, and there's been a lot of investment in promoting some extraordinarily weak ideas. Sitting at the top of all of these very bad ideas is one giant one, which we can call anti-humanism. Transhumanism, the trans phenomenon, net zero, lockdowns, population reduction, all of these ideas are basically the ugly stepchildren of anti-humanism. There are, as I read it, essentially two competing ideas in the world at the moment. One is that humans are the best feature of the observable universe, the only creatures capable of creative thought and generativity and of creating explanations for how reality works, that humans ought to be revered and ought to be cherished, that we should plan for their flourishing, that we should be planning for the flourishing of as many people as possible, that human agency ought to be respected, that civil liberties ought to be respected, and that the imposition of top-down, one-size-fits-all policies on humanity is completely incompatible with that kind of worldview. Set up against them are people who regard humans as the scum on the surface of the little blue dot, people who regard humanity as some kind of blight, people who believe that the earth needs rights to protect it from these horrible humans. And I think it is a deeply sad reflection of the state of our societies that so many people live in the latter camp